Hey everyone, Antonio Zapata here, pre-sales consultant from the Embarcadero team, and I'm joining you today from the sunny Spain, and I'm really thrilled to show you all the new features we're bringing to RAD Studio 13.
Hey everyone, I'm Nuno Castro, product manager at Embarcadero, and I'm pretty excited to be joining you guys here today to show you some of the new goodies we have on RAD Studio 13. See you in a second.
Hi, I'm Marco Cantù, RAD Studio Senior Product Manager, and I welcome you to this webinar introducing the fantastic new features of RAD Studio 13 Florence.
Hello everyone, Ian Barker, the Embarcadero Developer Advocate. I'm really pleased to say we've been working on RAD Studio 13 behind the scenes for a long time now. Lots and lots of things packed into it. It's a big, big release, and it's very good to be able to tell you about it today. Speak to you soon.
Hi, I'm Max Manship. I'm a product manager for C++ Builder, and I'm joining you today in this webinar to show you what our team has come up with in the latest RAD Studio release.
Welcome again to this webinar focused on what's new in RAD Studio 13 Florence. As you can see from the agenda, we do have a rich number of new features in the product that we're going to cover in this webinar, from change to the Delphi language to a new C++ Builder compiler, from IDE improvements to a new set of AI components, and then, of course, improvements to our UI libraries and to the new web stencils technology we introduced in RAD Studio 12. Before we get into the detail of what's new, what is RAD Studio, in case you haven't been using it? RAD Studio is a software development IDE for building native applications for Windows, for both Delphi and C++, or for macOS, iOS, Android, and Linux from Delphi using a single code base. And it's focused on visual designers, embedded AI, integrated tool chains, comprehensive data access, component-based architecture, and really an accelerated development workflow. Let's start from the core foundation of RAD Studio, which is the programming languages and compilers that are part of the IDE. First, the Delphi compilers. Delphi, as you know, is an Object Pascal derivative language. It's extremely powerful and readable. It can generate native code for 9 different targets. And RAD Studio 13 includes significant extensions to the language, highlighting the fact that the company is committed to keeping the Delphi language modern and relevant. But let's start to look at the actual feature. The most important one is a new ternary operator that we are introducing in the language. We're using the if keyword to make it more readable and more Pascal-like compared to the question mark semicolon syntax used by other programming languages. The behavior and the logic is the same. You can have a condition in an expression, so the if keyword is reused as an else portion of the expression. Notice that you also need to be careful because other operators have higher priorities, so you might need to use extra parentheses when merging an if statement within a complex statement. But again, the important thing is that even if the first demo up there shows a case of an assignment written in a different way, this is not only for assignments. It can be used for any expression within replacing a parameter in a function call or in any other scenario where an expression is allowed in the language. This is the most important new feature of the Delphi language in 13, but it's not the only one. We have a name of interesting function, which lets you get a string representation of almost any identifier in your code. There are new push-opt and pop-up compiler directives similar to C++ pragma option, which allow you to restore the set of compiler options at a given point in time and then, save the compiler options at a given point in time and then restore them later on. There is an explicit set parameter available in record class operators initialize and finalize, used for creating custom managed records, which simplifies the syntax because avoids you to having to explicitly indicate the output and var parameter of the two operations. We also have another syntax helper, which is new operators is not and not in. Again, it's not just a slightly different syntax, it's making the code more readable and introducing an operator that combines two different operators in one. There is a no return directive. You can mark introducing additional constraints for generics types. Interface unmanaged and non-null are the three new constraints. This helps simplifying some of the logic in terms of generic records and is also a foundation for future work that we want to do at the compiler level. Finally, we have an extended if-opt directive. You can have conditional code depending on the status of a directive, and it was limited to the short version of the directives. Now it's expanded to all of the long directives. And now Ian is going to show you a short demo of some of these new Delphi language features. Ian?
Thanks, Marco. As we just mentioned, there are a few new things in the Delphi language with RAD Studio 13, but perhaps my favorite one is the ternary operator. This demo actually relies on a third-party component, but don't worry, it's free, and you can get it from Get-It and install it. If you want to try out my demo code that I'm going to show you, then install this SynEdit. The only reason I'm using that is just so that it does a kind of cool demo. Go into here, I'm going to open my thing called a ternary test. Now, what is the ternary operator? Well, the ternary operator looks like an if statement, except you can use it in things like expressions. You might have seen it in other languages like C++, where it's a question mark and a colon. This we felt was a bit more Pascal-like, and that's how it works. There are quite a few rules about where you can use it, and we explain that in some blog posts and some other demos. But let's just run this demo just so that you can see, because it does make it quite clear how each thing works. The ternary operator uses a thing called lazy evaluation. What that means is, if I run it now, you'll see that it's only going to evaluate the argument that is selected by this conditional here. So I've got a conditional statement. So if something, then do this thing if it's true, and then do this thing if it's false. So a bit like a conditional statement. But if I was using the if-then function, both of these things would be evaluated, and that can have some unpleasant side effects. So just to check and make sure what we're talking about, I'm just going to select cat. So this time, only cat is evaluated as part of that expression. You can use it in functions. So if I use it in a function like this, you can see, is my screen width less than 2000, then return 100. Otherwise, take the screen width and divide it by 200. Well, this is a 1920 by 1080 screen that I'm recording on, and so as you can see, it's divided that value down by 200. And you can then say if some other test, which is in the code, then put small, otherwise not small. And finally, those of you that know I'm a Star Trek fanatic, as you've seen from my background, there's a famous scene where he keeps being asked, how many lights can you see? So how many lights can you see, Captain? Well, I hate it when things are not pluralized properly. You know, 0 light, 1 lights, 2 lights, that kind of thing. I hate that. Well, with this function, you don't have to worry about that anymore. I can literally say, I can see, and if the lights are equal to 1, then don't put an S on the end. Don't make it a plural. Otherwise, add an S on the end. So it says 0 lights, 1 light, 2 lights, 3 lights, 4 lights. Grammatically correct, just the way it should be. That's the ternary operator.
So now let's talk a little bit about C++ Builder. So C++ Builder is a rapid application environment from Embarcadero that uses C++ that has C-lang-based compilers that were extended to integrate with Delphi, so it understands the VCL and FireMonkey frameworks and allow you to build native Windows applications or cross-platform applications. And for this time around in RAD 13, we are very happy to let you know that our new modern Win64 compiler has been updated to CLang and LLVM20. What this means is that CLang20 and RAD 13 introduce C++23 support. So right now on C++ Builder, you will have the option to choose between one of the 3 ISOs. That means you can choose between C++17, C++20, and C++23. Now, if you build a new application with the new Win64 compiler, the default will be C++23, but nothing is in your way to choose any of the other ISOs. Another thing to keep in mind is that although we support C++23, not all features will be available, as we will only surface the ones that are currently available in CLang. To know exactly which features you will be allowed to use, you can go to one of the links showed in the slides and see what is available for you today. This is a significant update for us, as for the first time in a long time we are on pair with CLang, and their latest version is actually 20. And this means that Embarcadero is fully invested on C++ Builder. Now, to showcase some of these new things, let's jump into the IDE and see some demos. Now that we are in the IDE, let's have a look at some of the features that I talked about. So first, if you go under Project, Options, under Building C++ Compiler, you can choose in this drop-down which ISO do you want to program with. The options available will be ISO 17, ISO 20, or ISO 23. For Win64-bit Modern, keep in mind that any newly created project will use 23 as default. But for any other toolchain, you'll still be using C++17 and you can't choose any of these ISOs, only for the new modern toolchain. Now let's hit save and run this simple VCL app that I created. So what this app does is, if you click any of these buttons, it will run some code of these newly ISOs, some code that was introduced in either C++20 or C++23, and output the result. Now, for the purpose of these demonstrations, I will just look into the expected demo, as is one of the features that I like the most. So let's click on it. So what is expected? So expected is a value or error return type that either holds true for success or false for error. In this case, what we are doing in here is we have a safe divide function, and this function returns an std expected int or an std expected string, so either a value, int, or an error, std string, without any exceptions, without any magic. And as we have seen from the demonstration, on success, we either get a truly call and then we call .value on it, or we get a failure and it's falsy and we get to read the error. In this first case, we handle the success error because 10 divided by 2, it's a possible operation, so we outputted the result that is 5, and the result variable was a truthy value, so we enter in the first condition. But on the second case, where we try to divide by 0, the result variable contained false, so we ended the unexpected result, and we are able to access the error function to get the error message and handle it gracefully. Now, other cool thing that we can do with expected is that actually we can use compositions on it like .transform. In this case, we are using .transform to multiply the result by 2, but we can do other things like .and then and .or else for chaining success and handling errors. Other cool thing about this is that if it has an error, it will propagate it automatically. One of the cool things, and the reason that I like expected, is that we can use it to anticipate recoverable errors, like input validations, parsing situations, and it's much nicer than just throwing an exception. Now let's get again into the slides and see what else we have for C++23. So back to the slides, and alongside the move to LLVM and CLang 20, there are a few practical wins that we got on this release too. So first is an improved address sanitizer runtime on Windows 11. So memory bugs like use after free and overflows are caught earlier and more reliable. Second is our C++ runtime DLLs are now versioned. So this prevents conflicts when multiple RAD Studio versions are installed when you ship apps. And third is we improved compatibility with legacy C++ Builder toolchains, so it's easier for you to migrate and bring older projects forwards. So we expect that now it will be easier to bring any projects forward, and it will be a smoother transition for you. This was it for now for
installation. There is an initial installer, and then there is a platform and feature selection that comes later on. This is what happens with both with the online installation, where only the initial installer is downloaded, or with the offline installation, where you can download the entire ISO image for all of the features, which are later installed on your machine. What's relevant in terms of change in the RAD Studio 13 installer is that the 64-bit ID is not available as an initial preview option, but is being integrated fully into the core installation because it's now promoted to a full-blown feature. The other change is related with the Windows SDK installation. We used to ship a Windows SDK installer. Now it's a prerequisite. You should install it yourself. If you don't have it installed, if our installer doesn't find a Windows SDK, it's going to show this notice and provide you a link to open the web browser on the Microsoft SDK download page and actually install the Windows SDK before you continue with the RAD Studio installation. Now, there is one change that is technical, but is certainly important and it's going to have a lot of impact. We have unified all of the internal versions to number 37. There used to be a different version number for the compiler itself, for the Delphi compiler, for the package, runtime package extension, for the internal version numbers, for the folder where the RAD Studio ID is installed. And these different versions were all different numbers, not aligned one to each other, causing some confusion. So they're now all aligned to version 37 or 370 for the compiler. Getting to the actual IDE, RAD Studio has a comprehensive and powerful IDE. It's also a highly customizable IDE, something we won't be able to cover much in this session. And as I already mentioned, RAD Studio graduates the 64-bit IDE for 64-bit target only as a full-blown feature. So the two IDEs remain available in parallel. You can use the 64-bit IDE when targeting Win64 and the other IDE when targeting Win64 or any other platform. We've added some of the features that were missing in the preview of the IDE we shipped in 12.3, namely code tooling for C++ with the new version of Visual Assist, support for COM, ActiveX, and type libraries, live templates, the Ctrl-J feature, and the surround menu. And we've also made a number of quality improvements for the IDE and for the debugger. We have removed one feature, the old UML modeling. This has also been removed from the 32-bit IDE. Now, Nuno is going to cover some of the code tooling in the RAD Studio IDE.
Thanks, Marco. So now a quick update on code tooling and starting with C++. So for 13, we have reworked the Visual Assist integration for C++ Builder, as the 64-bit IDE was a pain point, so we have rebuilt the bridge. Now you can expect more stability in both IDEs, and VA will attach now cleanly into the 64-bit IDE and staying stable while switching the projects in the project group, changing tool chains or flipping configurations. So you can expect it to now handle C++ Builder specific cases gracefully. Moving to Delphi, and a note before I continue to say what is available now on 13, Delphi LSP remains the direction and we are improving its architecture. However, because we know completion is critical, the classic Code Insight engine is available again as an optional completion provider, and you can enable it in the project options. Note that with this change, if you decide to enable the classic completion, features like the structure pane, error insight, or editor navbar won't work while the classic engine is on. For the future, we don't plan to have those working with the classic engine because we still believe that LSP is the future of Delphi tooling. We also include a Delphi Upgrade Advisor wizard that we recommend that everyone runs. This will identify in code the changes and in the project configuration changes that can improve tremendously the compilation time and the code tooling experience. So we really advise everyone to run it and implement the changes that were shown in this wizard. In Getit, you can find some include scripts for use statements cleanup. In the meantime, while we are working on the native code tooling for Delphi, we are promoting the use of MMS Explorer. This was done by one of our MVPs, Rabe, and it's available on Getit. You can see the details of it in the website showed in the slides. And it will work on the 32-bit and 64-bit IDE. This package will offer code navigation, refactorings, formatting, a lot of coding helpers, and much more. So definitely check that out and install it, as it will be very nice add-on to your daily development. Now some updates on debugger quality. So first, we have moved our LLDB-based debugger to LLDB20, matching the CLang 20 toolchain. And what this does is it brings a smoother 64-bit debugging experience and better performance. On top of that, we have done some small quality fixes, like for example, in the IDE options, you can now enable the code highlight in the debug windows. Besides that, we now have the correct handling of argv and argc with spaces. We have proper Unicode via output debug string, and we have actual display of white chars. Now a little bit more focused on the Delphi side of things, we have made pointer addresses look more like Delphi style. Scoped enums and sets show correctly now. We have better symbol and name resolution. We have broader Unicode identifier support and a practical win. On the touch to process dialog, now we have an extra columns, making it faster to pick up the right process. And now over to Marco again.
Thanks, Nuno. The other notable change in the RAD Studio IDE is a set of new search features that we have added in a number of panes, specifically in the project manager, in the structure view, and in the message pane and events log. For each of these windows, you can type to filter what is visible, the lines that are visible on the screen, and also there is configuration in terms of the matches, if you can make them case sensitive or words only, or even use regular expressions. For the message log, on top of it, we are adding some highlighting options that are now available by default, and the ability to group hints and warnings by source code file rather than having individual lines. This is handy when you have a large number of hints and warnings in your large projects. Let me actually show you these features in practice. This is a demo project in the RAD Studio 13 IDE, and as you can see, I can actually filter items in the project list. Of course, because this has very short list, it's quite useless, but that's how it works. But if you look in terms of searching in the structure view, that is more interesting. I can search for paste, and I have paste items, paste operations, and so forth. Everything that has that word into the symbol. Now, the other thing I want to show is that when we are building this application, which has a few hints, the hints are grouped into a single entry as sub-items of this entry. This feature is enabled with a new option, group hints and warnings by file name, in the IDE options. And similarly, there's also the ability to enable or disable highlighting in the build log. There are also a number of quality improvements in the RAD Studio IDE, from improvement to smart coding side, our integrated AI tooling for developers. There is, for example, a new test connection, which you can use to make sure your configuration with OpenAI, Gemini, or one of the other providers is properly working. And also some improvements in the way we process the responses to some of the prompts and some of the automatic prompts associated with the different menu items in the editor. Also, we have enabled options to use the editor background color for tabs and similarly activating the IDE themes for the structure highlight colors. We have introduced an option to copy error message from the structure pane where the error insight appears. And also, whenever there is an exception in the IDE, the stack trace, rather than being hidden with like an extra options button, is now directly visible in the main dialog box. Last thing I want to mention briefly, because it's not for everyone, but it's a very important feature. We keep expanding our Tools API, which is an API that allows customers to add features within the RAD Studio IDE with official interfaces. New Tools API extensions in 13 include some welcome page refresh mechanisms, and then notifications when the editor cursor moves or when the user types in the editor. Now, another change that's part of our tooling integrated with the IDE is about the resource compiler. We are introducing a new open source resource compiler. It's called Resinator. This is the default in the build system. It's integrated and ships with the product. You can, of course, decide you want to pick a different resource compiler, including the resource compiler that comes from the Windows SDK. And so there is an option in terms of resource compiler to use, which offers you the ability to pick one of the available resource compilers. Now, another big change in the product is in terms of Get It, which is RAD Studio Package Manager. For the first time, we are offering versioning support. That means that rather than having one version of the package, the most recent version of the package available, you can also pick an older previous version in case your software was built with that version, that specific version of the library, and you want to stick with that version of the library until you have time to upgrade it and upgrade the application that interfaces with that library. It is a very relevant feature. Us and third-party vendors will be able to add multiple versions of the same package in Get It. And again, you'll be able to pick the version you want. You'll be able to install the latest, which is the default, to update from an older version to a newer version, but also eventually to downgrade from a newer version to an older version available in the package manager. As of today, because this is a new system in 13, there are not many versions available for the packages, but of course we plan expanding and using this system for the future, making available a number of versions of packages as new releases happen. Now, there are other changes in the Get It user interface. A very important one is the ability, once you have installed a package, to open the installation folder for that specific package, which can be a bit hidden from view. The other thing is that rather than having multiple buttons, we have coalesced everything into a single button that will show the most common or most obvious operation, which is generally either update or uninstall, if something is installed, or install if the package is not installed. But then, again, you'll be able to use the drop-down to pick a version or to pick other operations. Speaking about AI, on top of the enhancements made to the smart coding side, we are also launching a new website called RAD AI Companion. This is a chatbot that's been specifically trained on RAD Studio documentation, DocWiki, and books and other content. You can query it to ask anything about our IDE, our tools, our language, our libraries, and it's going to return information with links to the relevant DocWiki pages. And also, you can ask it to generate application source code based on code it has learned from. This is the actual user interface. It's a very simple example of a request that was asked in terms of what's the most important class in the VCL library. You can argue about the answer, but the important thing is there. And again, it's there with links to the associated DocWiki pages. So it's there, it's available, it's open for every and each of our customers. There is another brand new feature we're introducing in this release of RAD Studio, which is a new foundation for the product, AI Component Pack. The core idea is to provide a foundation for you to build onto, but also for our third-party vendors and community to expand and extend in different directions, as you'll see. It's a set of core components And we want this to become a foundation, and for this reason, it's available in Gedit for all SKUs and versions of the product. Now, what is the idea? As I was mentioning, it's meant to be a building block and a foundation for the future. There is an AI connection component with a role that can be compared to a database connection. The concept is that it's a single connection component, and then it uses drivers to configure the connection for different solutions, and what comes out of the box is support for OpenAI, Claude, Gemini, and Ollama. Because these APIs are used also by other vendors, in reality, the availability is for a much larger number of AI engines. There is a wizard to configure the connection. Again, there are drivers that you can have specific parameters for, not too differently from a driver integrated in a FireDuck connection. Outside of the connection component, there are also request components that you can use to access different data types, and you can create your own prompts and associate with the different components depending on the type of the result information. The goal, of course, is to make this a feature you can use when building new AI-powered application, but also because we know a lot of you have a large investment in existing application, to extend existing application built with either VCL or FireMonkey by adding AI capabilities. If you want to have a look graphically at how the architecture works, as I was mentioning, a single AI connection component with drivers that connect via REST APIs with some of the most important AI vendors out there. A single component, regardless of the backend, a set of drivers to map to the engine. Of course, one of the goals is to make this an open architecture, as I mentioned, so new drivers can be added by us in the future or by any third party. So once you have the connection, you can use a number of request components that can be used to request something that results in a textual information, in a string. You request images, will return one or more images, or you can extract JSON structured data, in which case you might want to bind this with data in memory and with a UI. The goal of these request components is to make them visual, make them easy to integrate with an existing application, make it easy to use them as a backend for your UI, and then use the regular UI controls you're used to for text, image, display, and so forth. In this webinar, we don't want to delve into the details of the Smart AI component spec and show demos. We'll probably do another webinar soon and focus on it and the architecture and the underlying operations. But what I want to show is a couple of images, design time, showing how things can be integrated, and you can even use the live binding designer to connect input and output of this new set of components, and then showing outside of text and chat demos how you can easily ask for an image and then display the result in a image control, or, which I found quite interesting, have a prompt that returns a JSON data structure and then map it to database structure and display it like any data table on screen. Now that we've covered the most relevant new features of RAD Studio 13 Florence, let's go over through a lot of other extensions, changes, and improvements we've done throughout our platforms and our libraries. RAD Studio targets multiple platforms, primarily with Delphi, and we maintain low-level APIs and SDK tools integration with all of them. As you'll see in a second, RAD Studio 13 has a lot of improvements in the platform integration for the different platforms that we support. Before we get to that, let's recap where we are, which platform we target. We target Windows, of course, Windows 11 and 10, Windows Server 2025 and 22. And of course, we target both 32-bit and 64-bit version of those platforms, although the IDE requires 64-bit version of Windows to run. For Delphi, we also target iOS 18, macOS 14 and 15, Android 14 to 16, and the recent versions of Ubuntu and Red Hat Linux Enterprise, and also the Windows Linux subsystem. We are making change throughout some of these APIs. For Android, we are still targeting API level 35 that was already available in 12.3, and which is the current version required by the Play Store. But we have updated the Java 2 OP engine, the tool to translate headers from Java to Object Pascal, moving to a different internal engine provided by the SDK. We have updated a lot of the other tools used for building and deploying application on a device. I'm not going to read through the entire list of platform tools that we have updated to a newer version, leveraging new features that these new versions bring along. And the thing I want to mention is that the other requirement from Google Play Store is the 64 kilobyte page size requirement. This is going to be enforced later this year. It was already supported in RAD Studio 12.3. Now, in terms of iOS, we have added few dozens of missing functions in different kits in the core. So there is really a new roundup of APIs that are being, in some cases, corrected, but in most cases, added to the core APIs that we provide, translated to Object Pascal and ready to use. For the Windows platform, we have updated a lot of the Windows API interfaces. We've also done a refresh of the entire WinRT APIs available in the Windows app SDK. We have refreshed also the classic WinAPI MD projection and updated the WebView 2 control interfaces and the TH browser component that wraps the WebView 2 control, bringing you the ability to use a modern browser integrated into your VCL and FireMonkey applications. Now, in terms of runtime library, there are a lot of small changes, too many to list in a slide. It's, of course, a foundation for all other libraries, and we keep expanding and improving it, mostly in terms of quality and performance improvements. We have done a number of changes in the JSON processing, allowing you to ignore fields and properties, reworking the JSON number structure, and supporting unsigned 64-bit integers. There are really, as I was mentioning, dozens of small improvements in a lot of different areas, from registry, threading, and RTTI, and really, this is just a small list of what was done in the release, and a full list of improvements from customer request is actually available on the doc wiki site. For web client libraries, we have added support for HTTP 3 in the HTTP client library. There is a new asynchronous version for SOAP request execution. Now, in terms of database support, we have also added support for unsigned big integers in a number of internal data structures. There's a new field type specifically for large unsigned integer, and of course, support for the database that have unsigned big integer support, like Oracle and MySQL, and of course, also our in-memory FDMEM table. There's one feature that we added that I want to mention, although it's relatively minor, because it's part of a feature that many people might not be aware of, which is the ability of dragging fields to a form from the fields editor. This is being extended, allowing you, but particularly third-party vendors, to do a custom mapping and associate a different UI control with the given field type. Because this feature is not that common, I wanted to show you how it works. So I'm creating a new VCL application from scratch. I'm dragging over database table with the connection, go to the fields editor, add all fields. And now what I can do is I can drag the fields to the UI, and I'm getting a label and an edit associated with the specific data source and the specific field. And so I can go back here, grab a bunch more. It also offers multiple selection, and I can really, really quickly build a UI. And now what can happen is that you or a third-party vendor can map the field type to a specific data-aware control you want to use in your user interface. Now, there are a few more features, like the ability to determine how text is trimmed in a DB text, and a way to navigate from data source to data set. Now, FireDuck is the primary data access layer available in RAD Studio, and we are continuing to offer extensions and offer support for new features in various databases and their drivers. We, in particular, updated the Oracle driver, adding support for open authentication. We've extended the support for backups with parallel backups for Firebird, and improved support for array types in PostgreSQL. There are other things we've done in FireDuck, specifically for the mem table. It allows loading standard JSON, not only JSON exported by the FDMEM table itself. Supports the ability of paging the content. For example, when you want to return the data to a web page, when it's filtered, so you can track how many records are active compared to how many records are in the table, and how many are skipped because of the active filter. Now, the other thing I want to mention, talking about databases, that Interface 15 is coming, the new version of Embarcadero DBMS. And while we are still bundling the older versions, the license of RAD Studio 13 includes already the license for the developer edition of the coming Interface 15. Now, the next area I want to cover, and it's not so late in this webinar because it's not important, actually it is extremely important for us, is to go over change and new features for our two user interface libraries, VCL and FireMonkey. Starting with VCL, which is currently the best and most comprehensive UI components library in the industry for building Windows desktop applications, and a library we continue to expand and invest on. We are adding a couple of long-awaited features to the VCL. To be more precise, we are adding extensions to existing features that customers asked since those features were introduced. So the first is support for styles in the title bar. The title bar allows you to create modern UIs where the menus and buttons and other elements merge into the title for the form. I mean, I'm sure if you're using Windows, you have seen a lot of applications that offer that style. We have had a title bar component for some time, but it was not possible for the title bar component and the components on the title bar to use VCL styling, to use dark color, to use all of the other UI elements that you can see here in action in this animation. Not only this, but you can fully customize the style colors for all of the various elements, the close and open button, the caption, the components dragged there, the icon, and so forth. So each of the elements that you can place in the title bar, you can also customize the foreground and background color. Not only, but we've improved the way a lot of the components that you can use in the title bar. We've added a show hint property for the caption button items you can put there. Another long-awaited scrolling feature is the ability to scroll content in an action menu bar when the action menu bar does not fit into the screen space, the screen height. It's very important because this is a common component that we encourage using based on VCL action architecture, which is a very powerful architecture for separating the UI with the logic behind the UI. Adding this capability really lets you target even computers with small screen estate without having to trim or cut or change the layout of your menus. It works for some menus, it works for pop-up menus, it works in a number of different scenarios. As you can see in this application, if you have a menu that exceeds the height of the screen, you get the scrolling items. Same for some of the sub items if they are too big, and same for a pop-up menu associated with the right click of an item. Everything is working very smoothly. It works with the styles, and it works, of course, with standard Windows UI. Alongside with this change, we've also refined a component introduced in RAD Studio 12, which is called Form Stubs Bar. It's a component used to improve and redesign your MDI application, also for building application with a tab-based UI. As you can see here, we made things more flexible. You can merge your Form Stubs bar in the title bar, and you can have more flexibility in terms of coloring and the layout and different extensions that we made to this very nice component that lets you build modern applications or migrate old looking MDI application to a modern look and feel. Now there's way more. We have started integrating UI automation interfaces in the core VCL library at the wing control level. This is a foundation step that will need to be followed up by specific implementation for higher level UI controls that we'll be working on in future releases. But the foundation is there for you to start using for both accessibility support and to help building automatic UI testing. There are a lot of other improvements in the VCL library, from the control list component to the toggle switch to the Edge browser already mentioned, the style manager, month calendar, and new events for T-Splitter. I could continue for probably 10 minutes going through each and every small change and improvements we've done, and a lot of these are actually done because we had specific customers with requests and specific use cases that make sense, and we wanted to be able to let you easily implement. Let's switch to FireMonkey, which is RAD Studio multi-device library, which allows you to create a single application with a single UI, single source code, and target 5 different operating systems from mobile to desktop. The most important things in the new FireMonkey is support for fast animations, and this is obtained with a new service called Display Link service. Rather than having an abstract timer-based animation flow, now it uses the platform capabilities for Android and iOS in particular to make sure that the animation adapts to the frame rate and to the available frame rate depending on the CPU load and of the animation itself or something else going on in your application. So rather than having stuttering animations because the application cannot keep up with the need to update the content, you can have a smooth, fast animation if the CPU allows it, or slower animation but still very smooth over time. That's not the only thing, although it's very relevant. We've introduced a new component called Mask Edit, which, not surprisingly, is very similar to the VCL style input mask edit. You can provide an input mask that's going to determine what you can type, sequence of letters and numbers, hyphens, other symbols, and so forth, as you type it. So char by char, pressed on the keyboard or introduced in a virtual keyboard on your device. We have enhanced the presented scroll box component, which is used a lot for scrolling animations, the way the content bounces at the top and the bottom, and the interaction with touch. We have enhanced spell checking, added an incredible new amount of alignment options. It's really going out of control a bit. There is a new T application events component, again similar to the VCL application events components. It's a nice central place where you can handle things like a form has been created or something happened at the application level without having to write low-level source code. Just drop a component, handle one or few of the event handlers, and you can easily implement an application-wide feature for your mobile or desktop app written in FireMonkey. We even expanded auto-completion for T-Combo Edit, changed some of the bitmap copying operations by leveraging the GPU. The other thing we've done is we have not only surfaced, again, FMX Linux, but we've improved the integration, make it smoother, integrated the UI of the IDE in a way that you can target Linux at design time, and everything works much more similarly to how it works on other platforms. It's still a download available in Gedit, and it's still only for enterprise customers, but it's a very, very powerful way to target Linux desktop alongside with Windows, macOS, Android, and iOS in FireMonkey. FireMonkey has also been expanded to use the latest version of Skia for Delphi for a number of different drivers and operating system targets. Skia, if you haven't noticed, it was introduced in 12, and it allows for very fast and higher-end graphic capability and UI features. Skia for Delphi is embedded as a foundation for the FireMonkey drivers for different platforms, but there are also, in addition, specific components you can use tied to the Skia UI and logic, both for VCL and FireMonkey. And, well, we have updated the web browser component for Windows, again, similarly to what we've done for other platforms with the new WebView 2 control integration. We have moved to a newer version of the emoji symbol library. We have added new event handlers in a number of components, allow the ability to reverse the logic of the track bar, customizing the menu item height, and, which is extremely important, it looks like a small footnote at the end of the slide, but it is fairly fundamental, the support we're adding for full screen support on iOS and for edge-to-edge support for Android devices. These are really, really extremely relevant features that we're adding to FireMonkey in RAD Studio 13. In the last portion of this webinar, we want to cover another area that has seen a lot of improvements in this release and in recent release. This is the web technologies that you can use for building not only web services, which is our RAD server technology, but also for building web application by combining the Web Broker Foundation and web stencils. Web Broker is the framework for building web server extensions for IIS Apache and now also Nginx, or creating standalone web servers. Web Broker is a foundation also for RAD Server, DataSnap, and a lot of third-party libraries that exist in the Delphi and C++ Builder ecosystem. 13 introduces the largest upgrade to Web Broker since Delphi 6. We are introducing integrated sessions. There's more in the coming slides, but it's really a big feature to have as a foundation in the core library. We have introduced fast TGI support that opens up the ability to use Nginx, but also allows a different integration with Apache without loading the library in the same memory space of the web server. Of course, FastCGI is also added to the Web Broker wizard that helps you create Web Broker application in the first place. We have introduced support for Apache config configuration, so you can have a number of information in your Apache config files that are loaded directly into records in the Delphi application. We have expanded logging by introducing an integrated logging capability at the Web Broker level in the T Web Application class. The mapping is automatic, not to like custom files, but whenever available to standard log files for Apache and IIS, while of course for CGI, we are using a custom log file name. As I was mentioning, the big new feature is sessions management. There is a new T-Web Session Manager component that you can drop in a web data module. This is a list of the web session objects. By default, the mechanism uses session cookie, temporary session cookies, but there are other options available to track sessions. There is a session object that is kept around in memory in web requests. There is an authentication method and an authentication username as part of the web request. There are also two ready-to-use authentication mechanisms for logging to help building logging. Of course, HTTP direct basic authentication or HTML form-based authentication mechanism. This is something you'll need to create the HTML for, but the logic and the core mechanism is available and ready to use. The Web Session Manager, as I will mention, is a non-visual component you can use with a number of configurations, and then whenever you get a request from a browser, the web session object is going to include information like session data, data vars that are per session and not global, user information, the time the session was created, the URL visited, the IP from the customer, and so forth. And there is also a web authorizer logic, because once you have a session and a user, you can determine which permissions the user has in terms of access to resources of your web application. Now, on top of Web Broker, what we have implemented, starting with RAD Studio 12.2, is a template engine called Web Stencils. It's a server-side template engine for building very efficient, fast performance, data-driven website. And it's available as an add-on to Web Broker, DataSnap, or RAD Server. Web Stencil is getting a major upgrade in 13 with the session support of Web Broker session logic, but also a new statement and some more information. The support for session data, of course, comes with the support for sessions.